folks, welcome to the fourth session of Scotch and Grey. In the background and responsible for the flawless functioning of the equipment, our Stephen. Say konnichiwa.
Konnichiwa.
For today I picked out an album that comes from a classic, a pioneer of electronic music. And when I say he comes from Asia, more precisely Japan, I'm sure for most people a loud bell will ring right away. He became known mainly for his electronic adaptations of classical pieces of music. Most famous works are pictures of an exhibition, Firebird, The Planets, Snowflakes Are Dancing, and others. Of course, we are talking about Isao Tomita. And because there are already countless reviews and analyses of the above-mentioned albums, I have chosen a rather unknown work, which was produced before all these well-known ones and which unfortunately didn't get too much public attention. It shows the master still in a transition between his work as a classical composer and that Tomita we all know and admire, who, so to speak, lived and worked between tons of synthesizers and created epic pieces for posterity. The early work from 1972, which we talk about today, is named Switched on Rock and is thus clearly based on Walter aka Wendy Carlos' album Switched on Bach from 1968. It was not released under Tomita's name at the time, but under Electric Samurai, as this production was actually a cooperation between him and Eiichi Narisawa, another Japanese prog rocker whose fame was rather limited to Japan. You have to know that Tomita actually earned his living by composing classical works, writing film scores, even jingles for radio commercials and similar unimportant things that had very little to do with electronic music. At some point in time, he was so bored by the combinatory possibilities of the sounds of traditional instruments when composing classical music that he started to look for something completely new. He found inspiration in avant-garde music, so-called musique concrète, which popped up in Europe at the time and which inspired many others to us well-known electronica musicians to experiment with sound by voltage, so to say. After Walter aka Wendy Carlos had demonstrated what you can tickle out of a classical piece of music with a Moog modular, Tomita knew that this is goddamn exactly what he needed. Something that gives the fullness of an orchestra, but with new sounds that are least similar to the traditional ones. But before he drew international attention with Snowflakes, it was pretty much in to cover the tracks that were successful in the charts, but with electronic instruments instead. So it's not surprising that Switched on Rock used songs that came from the studios of the most successful bands and singers at the time, which had generated millions of dollars of profit in record stores. Elvis Presley, the Beatles, Simon and Garfunkel, just to name a few. Now, you have to admit, when you hear the result of this mixture of synth sound and conventional studio drums, piano, spinet and guitars, it takes getting used to. If you have heard and celebrated one of his famous albums before, your jaw will drop when listening to Switched on Rock. First you think this must be a joke, or why does this music sound so cuckoo? But it was just the beginning of a new era. ideas had to gather, a new style had to crystallize first. I am sure if you hear Tomita's speech emulations using wah-wah filtering and portamento effects, and how he sometimes applies almost painfully ring modulations, you have to assume that a lot of these things weren't meant that seriously, and that he wanted to reproduce chart hits electronically in a somewhat disrespectful, nevertheless well-meaning musical manner, purely experimentally. It also seems obvious that we owe it exactly to this, in parts pretty weird sounding, crazy album, that his later works were interspersed with his legendary voice imitations via low frequencies and Moog filters. Since the chart hits he adapted now electronically were originally based on a human voice, an electronic counterpart for the tracks on Switched on Rock had to be found. So Tomita experimented for the high voice of Art Garfunkel with a simple sawtooth which had the overtones filtered out and which he modulated with a vibrato of varying intensity. This singing saw sound should be well known. For the vocal part in Let It Be, a low-frequency generator with a steep, very resonant low-pass filter was used, which was also modulated very staccato in its cutoff. Then a frequency variable vibrato was added, and here we have a frog. Oops, I mean the electronic John Lennon voice. In all tracks there was room for further variations of electronic vocal imitations, which actually remind us of human voices, but which mostly kept a rather funny sound character. Something between frog, mule and a poor cat with an aching stomach. Anyway, so it's not surprising that there was not only enthusiasm for the album and that the commercial success of the No Electric Samurais was very limited in the end. Especially the fans of the covered artists complained about how the music of their heroes was literally butchered by synths, and how dare he to mess that way with the Holy Top 10. After all, Elvis and the Beatles are serious musicians. Well, me and many other lovers of classical electronic music are surely grateful for the filter-loving Japanese joy of experimentation. But besides the often very idiosyncratic sound mix of partly psychedelic Moog bubbling and natural instruments, which is not easily comprehensible for pop and rock music-affine record buyers, there were some very pleasant sections for the years, which gave a hint of the future Tomita. In contrast to Walter aka Wendy Carlos, who often recorded barely processed oscillator sound for his Bach interpretations, Tomita understood from the very beginning how to get fullness into the mix. He used at least one kind of modulation for each track, be it flanger or phaser, tremolo or vibrato. There always had to be movement within the sound, always a certain amount of vividness had to be audible. In this way, he always succeeded in recreating a wide and deep space, which I personally always missed a little bit with Carlos. He attached more importance to musical virtuosity and fidelity to the original. Tomita, on the other hand, really loved to squeeze a melody through a ring modulator so that not much was left of the actual motive. But that's exactly what became his trademark. The right mixture of classic and avant-garde. Sometimes very harmonic, warm, and the next moment electronic shock moments, if I may put it that way. And that's exactly the kind of work Switched On Rock is. You can still recognize the original, of course, but as if through an electric curtain, so to say. The pieces appear in completely different colors, often in much cooler interpretations, but also playful, if not even totally nuts. This may be boldly annoying for some listeners after half of the album, but if you are aware that it wasn't about squeezing music violently into a new dress as seriously as possible, but rather to enter new paths with an open mind, then the variety of sounds and the unrestrainedness to really try everything is inspiring, even if it seems almost continuously like a musical drug frenzy. Okay, thus I recommend not to take the whole album in one go. That's only for the really hard ones. Maybe only 2 to 3 tracks per day. Best start at track 11, El Condor Pasa by Simon and Garfunkel. There you can hear those typical floating space sounds of Tomita's later albums right at the beginning of the tune, even if he's pretty soon going to shoot the nice warm atmosphere into Nirvana with a rather nasty ring modulator solo. How dare you? Short notice, as far as I know, this album is only available on vinyl, so good luck searching on eBay and the likes. Isao Tomita, one of my great heroes of electronic music, died on the 5th of May in 2016 at the age of 84 in Tokyo. Rest in peace, Tomita-san, and thank you for all the fascinating, wonderful and beautiful music you made. And to you, my friends of sound out of electricity, I say thank you for listening. If you liked the session, write us something nice in the comments and check back next week on our channel. If you like, leave a thumbs up or press the subscribe button. Then we are really happy here in the studio. My avatar freaks out completely, and after midnight I turn into the Electric Samurai. See you next time. Bye bye.